Hi everyone, this is Roj from Lifestyle Mastery. Here today I'm excited to have Satej Sirur, who's the CEO of Rocketium, which is an agile CreativeOps platform that helps enterprises take their communications to market faster and at low cost. Rocketium is funded by market investors like O21 Capital, Blume Ventures, and Emergent Ventures. Satej is an alum of Cornell and ISB. Big thanks to Anupam Rastogi from Emergent Ventures for the introduction. Welcome to the show, Satej.
Thanks for having me, Rohit. I'm excited to have this chat.
Awesome. So one of the few Indian companies which is more made the foray into US. But how did you get your start into startups?
Yeah, so it's funny that I should be so focused on startups in whatever I think the last several years of my career, because nobody I know in my near family, no friends, nobody in my network had even worked at a startup. And of course, when I was graduating back in 2004, that wasn't even a term that was around. But somewhere I always had this idea in my mind that I wanted to be a part of a new venture. Originally, my thought was that I want to invest in ventures, but over the years, it felt like being a part of those ventures, maybe someday starting it up, that would be what I wanted to do. Um, of course, the first few years of my career was in multi-trillion-dollar companies like Microsoft and Amazon, but startup was something that I always wanted to do. So when I went to do my master's, the lens with which I looked at it, I want to pick up skills that I can use to start my company. And mistakenly, I assumed that you need academics in order to gain skills to work. And so every step that I took was somewhere leading up to eventually joining a startup and then someday starting up. But yeah, I think the exit of the previous company where I was working to its competition gave me the chance to eventually start.
So super interesting. And you did your masters and then you came back to India. You did your MBA from ISB, but you work with Taxi for Sure. And I remember there was, in those days, Taxi for Sure when got an exit, Ola was a big exit. But what was the experience working there in a high growth startup like Taxi for Sure?
Yeah, so Taxi for Sure was the only time I worked in a B2C company where end users are our customers. Yeah. And it was a less than 2 years of experience when we went from a seed stage company to beyond Series C and eventually getting acquired in one of the largest exits in the ecosystem. And a lot of things had to be retooled, but the good thing was that, so one was in one of the meetings, this metaphor had come up that in many startups, the journey from the journey is sort of like from Earth to Moon, and a rocket takes off. And as you are approaching Moon and at different stages of the rocket's journey, different parts of the rocket are falling away. So somebody had made that as an analogy to saying that people who get started in that startup may not be the right ones at different stages of the company. I was very happy that a large part of the core team was actually there from the early days to the very end. That is both the testament to the quality of people that the founders had hired, the kind of culture that they had built, where everybody was learning and growing. So really, we all had that experience where we were there from the early days doing a lot of grunt work. Obviously, not as much as the founders, but a lot of. There was a time when to learn about the driver's day-to-day experience, I drove a cab and got to experience what they experienced. A very small part of it, but nonetheless something I wanted to try. Calling up customers, speaking with them, doing customer support, a lot of those kinds of things we were able to do. As the company grew, obviously layers of team come in, a lot of inter-team coordination has to happen, so many cities of expansion. So fabulous experience getting to see how a consumer organization is built, a high growth organization is built, where there's a lot of money, a lot of very little time, but massive goals to accomplish. So exciting experience.
Interesting. Reminded me of my experience at Oyo Rooms, but after your experience at Taxes for Sure, you started Rocketium. So what made you start Rocketium, and what was the concept all about?
So one is when I was at Taxi for Sure, I wasn't really thinking about what other company to join, what offers are there, what is the market like. So I was never really in the job market, so never had this concept that I need to go to some other company. Here is a lineup of potential companies I could go to when the company gets sold or any of that, right? I thought of Taxi for Sure, like many of my colleagues, as my own company, and we worked that way. So when the company exited, there was suddenly that question mark of what do we do next, because we did not really have 5 other companies, dream companies that we already had lined up. But for me, Rocketium as an idea was in my head since 2005. Very different from what we do right now, but the core concept of it, of helping people consume content, consume information, learn something using visual medium, that was as an idea that was in my head since 2005. So in 2015, when the exit happened, already for a decade, I had been thinking about the core idea in different forms. So I said, also had a chunk of change from the exit, which the founders had made sure that some of us really participated in that wealth creation. So that really helped me take that decision. That is how Rocketium started. Of course, today what we do is so very different from the first idea. But
got it. And who do you say is your ideal customer profile? Since you B2B SaaS, are you focusing on SMEs or large enterprises? Just wanted to understand, since you started, how it has changed over the years.
Yeah, and maybe I'll just take this moment also to acknowledge the role of pivots in startups, because when we started, it was a gaming company. The product had no pricing. It was meant to be bottoms up. Thousands of people should sign up, use it to create content, share it with each other so that they can learn something and become better in some way. And from there, we have tried pretty much every price point, from $0 a month to $1 a month to $10 to every one of those logarithmic steps we have gone through. So today we are an enterprise focused company, and this transition has also happened because of customer need, a pull from certain kinds of customers who have certain kinds of problems to solve. Very large, complex organizations where marketing, design, various business teams are involved, and their operations require a dedicated software, right? And so today, those are the kind of companies we work with. It is enterprises means for us, it is 1,000 or more employees, but typical customers have over 10,000 employees. And retail segment is where we see the most connect for our customers. But we have customers in very diverse segments like B2B, IT services, banking, energy, all of other media as well, because eventually this is about how do you communicate with your customers, whoever they might be, whether a business or an end consumer. The core concept that was the start of Rocketium, which was people have low attention span. How do you grab their attention? That is just as true when an enterprise has to communicate with their customers. And so how do you get that messaging out quickly? How do you do it in a way that captivates their attention? How is it relevant to them? How do you use data to make sure you are making the right decisions? So the core of it remains the same, that we still have, no matter how much resource we have, how many people we have in our team, the one thing that you cannot get is time. And so, because people's time is limited, how do you communicate better to them? So that the core of the problem has stayed the same, but certainly several pivots have happened along the way.
Got it. Interesting. And I've worked at OU Rooms and other B2B startups. And what I've realized is there are times when your team members have the domain experience. I work with a lot of consultants as well, but should you hire people who do not have domain experience, or do you think you should hire people who have that sort of SaaS experience and they do really well?
Yeah, so when we were at Taxi for Sure, the founders always had this mindset that we do not want a legacy mindset. We do not want baggage. We want people to come in and think differently. But in the B2B world, I have found that some of those decisions can be quite risky. We have tried to hire in the past where let us just look for smart and hardworking people, right? But so one of the prominent VCs had this model that they had shared, a mental model for risk, saying that in a startup, risk is like an onion. There are different layers of risk, and you want to de-risk one layer at a time. And so already there is so much risk in the startup working, not working, and now you are adding as a new team member. I do not know about the the industry. I do not know about the product itself and specific customers of the company. On top of that, I do not know the domain. I might not have worked in this department before. I might not have sold at this price point. So more and more of those things that are different means that I have to operate differently and I have to learn something new, because it might feel like, if I've done sales, I've done sales, or if I've done marketing, I've done marketing. That is not the same, because how do you communicate with a company of 100,000 people is very different from communicating with 100,000 companies of size 10, right? And so that is you do not want to create a clone army where everybody looks, feels, talks the same way. So you do want some bit of diversity, but where that diversity comes is very important. So at least in our experience, we try to hire people from the domain, people who have done similar things before, but then in interesting ways, we try to bring in diverse perspectives.
Okay. So it means that they can have SaaS experience, even though they have sold different sort of products, but they could have a SaaS experience.
Yeah.
Got it. And what do you ideally look for candidates? I've had revenue experience, especially sales and business development. Can you talk about what do you look for candidates, per se, sales, or if they have product experience?
Yeah. So very tactically, I'll explain in our interviews where I come in. So specifically for me, in my round, what I look for, I will say, and then more generally as a company, what we look for. But in my round, I'm predominantly listening to what they are saying. Predominantly, I'm answering their questions rather than questioning them, judging. In general, we try to keep the interview process in that way, because it's a two-way interview. We want to make sure they have all the information, we have all the information, because we want to be successful jointly. Either party does not really benefit from making claims that are not true, because sooner or later those surface, right? So at least when I have the conversation, I look for broadly these four things. I look for how interested they are in us, and that is demonstrated in different ways. What is their level of ambition? What are they really trying to achieve? And this step of Rocketium in their career, what does that really mean? Also look for culture fit in variety of ways. And like I said, you do not want to create clones of the rest of the team, but you want to look for a similar sort of mindset, and some core principles have to be the same. And finally, I look for depth in how they are talking. So somebody who's sort of very superficially making comments, or just kind of doing banter, versus somebody who's a little more deep in how they are thinking. And do I enjoy having conversations with these people? Am I learning from them? So those are broadly what things I personally look for in my round. But more broadly, in every round, there are technical aspects. So one of the things, our culture principles, we call them prime directives, which is a reference to Star Trek Next Generation. But so the first of our prime directives is being exceptional at your craft. So we think of the work that somebody does as their craft, and if they see it that way, then they have to demonstrate that, because there is not going to be a backup for each person in the team saying,
Right.
hey, if you screw up, if you do not deliver, that is okay. There is an army of other people who will make up for it. So most people are a single owner of whatever it is that they are doing. And so if they're not good at their work, then they should not be here. That is not the sort of person the rest of the team wants to work with, right? So that is something that we look for. Then there are other sort of not technical, but more sort of interpersonal, and sort of how they operate, their meticulousness, and various other things we look for. But as much as possible, we try to make the interview less of judging somebody's knowledge, judging somebody's on the fly knee-jerk responses to something, and instead make it more about how do they work on a regular basis. So we give people time to, for example, for the sales interview, we give people half an hour to 45 minutes to capture all of the points that they might have discussed with somebody, put it into a document that they could then share with the rest of the team in the process. For a product manager interview, it is something similar, to say, let me come up with the features, having spoken with somebody about their needs, let me come up with the features. So we try to do more of that rather than put people in some sort of a difficult situation and see how, because that's not how they would work on a daily basis, right? So we try and simulate as much of reality as possible.
Well, interesting. And you mentioned something very interesting about depth is what you look for. So, what questions would you ask a candidate if you're looking for, especially in a very short interview, like you spend not more than 2 or 3 hours with that person. Uh, what question would you ask them to know the depth and their understanding of the product?
Yeah, at least for me, the way I would the way I conduct these interviews is I ask them to ask me questions. So
Yes.
because I'm typically the last person that they speak with, I'm also not coming in as the technical expert in that domain, but somebody who's sort of any questions that remained unanswered, or after the entire process is over, if they got more ideas, I'm the person to answer those. So what sort of questions do they ask? After I have said something, are they able to respond in a meaningful way, or did that information become too much for them to process, and then they stop that and move on to the next question, right? Or are they able to have a more, so it is the softer sort of things. I do not have very specific questions to gauge depth. It is more about, this is a new situation for you, you have not learned about our product, our business, our customers, our team until today, but
Right.
are you quickly able to assimilate that? Are you able to say something interesting at the end of it? That is really how I would evaluate depth.
Got it. And since you've been in the business for quite some time, what's been your biggest hiring mistake?
Yeah, so I would say the category of mistake that that is the biggest one, I would say, which is a hard one to follow all the time, is not relying on gut instinct.
Hmm.
So somewhere you feel, hey, I do not want to be biased. Let me just make a pros and cons, or here are like 6 buckets in which we evaluate. Let's give a yes or no. But somewhere, even after those things are met, your gut tells you this is not the right decision. What do you chalk that up to? What line item would you put there without making it look biased, or without making it look like, hey, you're just willy-nilly taking a decision, right? Especially as founders, if your vote carries more weight, it should not, but if it does and people are influenced by that, then you are somewhere very careful of giving these kinds of gut decisions, right? But the way at least I have started thinking about it in the last few years is that your gut is also a very finely tuned machine learning model. You have constantly data coming in, you are making decisions, and very quickly you know if your decisions have been right or no, right? Rocketium itself, I have hired more than 100 people. In past companies, I've hired 100 plus people. So which means interviews I would have done 1,000 or more, right?
Yeah.
And so after all of those, just in hiring alone, I know how many times I've been right and not right, in which cases. And so
Hmm.
this is a finely tuned machine learning model. Whenever I've gone against my gut, I have found that things have not worked out. And typically it fails in one of those 4 areas that I said, that either it's not a culture fit, or they're really not ambitious. They're just doing something. They're not pushing themselves to do more things. That's why these 4 areas I typically look for. Or the big one that where smart people, talented people, hardworking people fail is not having interest in the space where we operate. They
Hmm.
have some notions somewhere, if they cannot relate to the work that is being done, despite all of their gifts and hard work, things just do not lead to results, right? And so I would say the biggest, the broad area would be around not trusting my gut.
Got it. Interesting. And as I alluded earlier, I've been into tech sales, but when is the right time to move from founder-led sales to building your own sales team?
Yeah, so what typically happens is, if founders are not able to sell, they feel that let us get somebody from the
Yeah.
outside, have them sell it. That could work, but somewhere think about it from the other side. They are coming into a new, like I said, the layers of the onion. We don't know about the product, we don't know about the business. So many things are unknown. By the way, has the founder who knows the most about the product, business, customer, technology, everything, even they are not able to sell? Or
Yeah.
B, do you have a lot of people showing interest? Maybe the founder is doing a bad job of selling. Maybe I could do a better job. But are there enough people expressing interest? Oh, that is also not there. So somewhere with those things happening, very ambitious, somebody who wants to be successful, that sort of a person will not really want to join. So you should be wary. If you have not seen success, if you do not have a lot of inbound interest coming from companies about the space where you operate, then you should be careful about the kind of people who sign on for that sort of work, right? Because you have to be a masochist or somebody who really loves risk and danger if you are joining a company at that stage. So the right time would be when one or both of those problems have been solved, where you can now tell a person that, look, if I can do it, you can do it better than me, but just know that I can do it. I have done this much before. By the way, already so many people are showing interest. Look at when we go to events, what happens. Look at the kind of people visiting our website, look at the, and so on. So I would say those two criteria would be the important ones to solve before moving from founder sales to building a sales team.
And just to follow up on that, do you think the startup should be at like a particular ARR or a revenue, like for example, $3 million or something like that, for a mature VP sales or a CRO to come in and take it to the next level, or do you think it should be just a couple of thousands of tens of thousands of dollars in MRR, and you should have somebody in demand gen or somebody as a VP sales coming in then?
Yeah, I would say a true VP sales is really needed when you have 2-3 levels of hierarchy, because think about the kind of work that they've been doing in the previous company. It is about hiring a team, getting a large number of people on board, making sure they are trained, making sure the operations that they are running, they are tight, are the calls happening correctly. So if that is the sort of work that they are doing, having them transition away from that into, oh, come into meetings with me, try and close the sales for me. They could do that for some time, but very quickly they need to transition into doing what they are really good at, right? The inverse of that is what we tend to do typically when we promote people. Somebody is really good at an individual contributor's work, we say, let us make you a manager. But those are two very different things. Because you're good as an individual contributor and make you a manager, you might not be successful at that. So somebody who's doing a manager's job, and in fact a manager of managers, asking them to go down 2 levels, they could do that. They might have done that a few years ago. They could help with that. But is that the best use of their time? Do you have enough proof points, enough capital, enough time to give to that person and say, go build a 20-person team and run that the way you used to run in your previous organization? So I feel for a more senior person, you should wait a little bit longer. In the early days, you should play that role of VP sales. You will do much worse than a true seasoned VP sales, but you should do some bit of that, right? Once you have a couple of account executives, little bit of demand gen happening, then maybe get a director of sales to manage the account executives, build out that team. So they are then doing the managing and training and all of those aspects, and then maybe get a VP sales. There will be people who say that I've done enough of this in large companies. Let me join this high-speed company. I see so much potential. I can take it to the next level. But that typically happens when there's a lot of strong inbound pull coming from that sector. Maybe the person has operated in that space before and they know the kind of customers who would buy it. But that's almost a founder sort of person who's coming and saying that, hey, why don't you focus on product? Why don't you focus on marketing and let me take care of the sales? So unless that happens, I think you should not be hiring a person like that.
Got it. Yeah, no, absolutely makes sense. And before the call, we discussed about you moving to US, and it is there's been a lot of Indian companies which have started operating in US, where the founders have also moved to US. But how can companies build teams in their respective markets, and if they want to, especially for Asian, Indian companies who have captured the Asian market, and how can they start acquiring customers in the US? Do you think a founding team member or a founder needs to move to US because it's such a big market?
Yeah, so if you just look at the market size perspective, the US market is at least 10 times larger, whether it is in the number of companies, potentially what each of those companies can pay, and so on. It is a market you cannot ignore if you want to grow beyond a certain size. And if the market is so large and it is one of your top priorities, then you need to allocate that sort of importance to it, right? So the answer might not always be founders, because let's say founders have their own comfort zone over the years. Maybe they've done sales, they've not been able to scale beyond a point, and now there are trusted people in the team who could do it a lot better. Maybe it is them who move to this new market. But whichever market it is, you need to have experts who are a combination of people who understand that local market and people who understand your customers, your product, your roadmap and vision. So I would say a combination of those two would be the best one, because you cannot expect people, let's say, to go to China and be successful having never lived or worked in China, right? And why would you expect the same thing to happen in the US, right? There is no reason why somebody who has never lived, worked, interacted deeply with American customers to come in and become successful quickly, right? So somewhere you do need local expertise. Life in the US is not very different from life in many cities of India, but still it is a different enough market that you need to have local expertise.
Correct. And what do you think has changed in the last couple of years, where companies are buying software, especially with a downturn and the recession that has happened?
Yeah, so one thing that has not changed is what is the expectation from software. The expectation from any software is to be an accelerator for human productivity. So help me do the same work better, help me do it in less time, help me do it at a lower cost, or just do it for me, which is just the ultimate extension to that sort of incremental improvement that is happening. So that has definitely not changed. What has changed is over the years, companies have bought so much software that it is just sitting on shelves, as it is called shelfware.
Mm-hmm.
People are very wary of that. They have now 50, 60, 100 different software tackling each minor parts of their workflows. And whether it is CFO, CIO, kind of more central folks who are looking at it, or individual teams, they are just tired of people pitching, but nobody in their team actually using software. So one thing they are wary about is this actually going to be adopted? How much are you expecting me to change my process, change the way I work? Because that is something that they are very wary of. So the more you can show as a company that the way you are already working more or less remains the same. Either it is because you integrate into all of those software and work transparently, or your software looks, feels, operates much like the software that they use. Or, for example, the most extreme version is you have execution support, where nobody in their team has to use the software, and then somebody else through a marketplace, through agencies, through your own team, you are helping operate. So that is a big one, saying, can you ensure adoption? Can you ensure we are actually getting value? And then the other one, because of cost pressure and all of those things, people are looking for how do they lower cost. So somewhere, if you're able to bring that in as a message, saying that how do we save your cost, how do we help you go live quickly, that definitely helps in this time.
Correct. And what do sales guys and companies need to do to get their deals over the line these days?
Yeah, so you have to work a little harder. There is a standard process that you might be following, saying sales has to be done a certain way, or we just, during COVID, we sold everything online. Now I don't want to travel, or we don't do trials. We don't, our pricing terms are a certain way. So definitely having more empathy for the buyer, understanding that they are not doing it because of their standard process, but they have real challenges on their side. So how do you become more flexible, accommodate their needs? That is certainly going to be very important. Also, as much as possible, focus on real value, not on laurels. Saying we have this customer, that customer. Really showing value, making sure very clearly you're able to show X dollars invested in adopting my software means Y dollars for you in Z months, right? So that needs to be very clear, and focus on delivering that, because people can and do cancel software today. It is not an annuity business where you keep getting paid no matter what. So being a little more flexible, really showing the value that is being added and actually adding.
Correct. And you mentioned about interactions, which is not only on Zoom, but do you think in the last couple of years, especially in the last year or so, face-to-face interactions has increased for Rocketium?
It is definitely increased, and that is one of the reasons why even I moved to the US, because until we had large enough customers, until we had complex enough operations that we had to streamline, there was really no need for us to meet in person. Smaller companies are more comfortable in doing calls, but with larger companies, multiple teams being involved, it certainly makes sense to do, let's say, workshops or in-person sessions, or just even more informally meet people, right? They need to see, especially large companies, need to get that feeling that this company is not going to go anywhere, or my kids go to the same school as their founders. Or some of these smaller things might not feel right that they influence the decision, but ultimately their neck is on the line. Believe it or not, I've heard cases where people in the customers we are selling to have been fired because the software that they adopted 2 3 years ago never really reached the success criteria that they had promised, right? So because the software did not perform, this person or these several people, they have had the axe, right? So that's why they have to be very careful about the decisions.
And as you mentioned, you look at enterprise clients, but how do startups need to change the way that they message to enterprises in order to sell, or do you find that the same sort of message is relevant for different ICPs?
Yeah, I think with enterprises, we have to realize that there are multiple people involved in the process. There are potentially multiple types of users who are going to be there. There are different kinds of buyers. So it is about helping the users make the right kind of a case to their superiors for the people who hold the budget, the people who are your champions, for them to be equipped with all the information that they need to convince themselves or their peers about it. So startups have to work on that. It cannot be a single message and a cool line. You can't just sprinkle whatever the flavor of the month is to your product. Just add blockchain here, AI there, and an enterprise is going to buy, because they want your software to help them succeed. It is not just a line item and they have to buy something and there is no innovation budget because of which they are buying. They actually want to use your software. So you have to help them make that case. You have to help various people in their team understand the value of it.
Got it. And stay quickly on to the top three. What's your favorite business book?
So this is a book called It's Your Ship. It's by a naval officer who talks about the leadership principles that he follows in his ships. And this ship used to be one of the worst ships in the fleet, and it became the top performer across several categories. A lot of lessons from there for founders of software companies or startups in general. But I really love that book.
Got it. We'll put that in the show notes. And if if you could go back in time when you started with Rocketium, what is the one thing you would have focused on or done thing differently?
Yeah, so though I glorified pivots and they are the right way to build a business, that is one thing I hope I would have done less of. There are enough pivots that will happen later, but really picked one customer, company size, an industry, the kind of buyer within that, and focused on their problems. That would have saved us a lot of time, because really where we have reached right now need not have taken several years. We should have been able to do that in a couple of years.
Got it. And lastly, what's your favorite online tool? For example, Gmail, Slack, Zoom.
Yeah, my favorite tool is Confluence by Atlassian. It is a wiki product. I like writing a lot. I like creating a repository of all ideas and things that have happened. I document a lot. So as a company also, we write a lot. So it's my favorite tool.
Oh, got it. We'll put that in show notes. And Satej, what is the best way people can reach out to you and know more about Rocketium?
Yeah, I'm fairly accessible on LinkedIn. That would be the best way to write to me.
Sure, we'll put that in the show notes. Satej, thank you so much for taking our time speaking to us. I really enjoyed my conversation with you.
Of course, Rohit. Thanks so much.